The rain fell in heavy sheets over the small town of Cedar Falls, Iowa, soaking the cracked sidewalks and turning the yellowed grass of Riverside Park into muddy patches. 13-year-old Marcus Johnson stood alone beneath the rusted metal awning of the park pavilion, watching the water cascade down in silver curtains. His worn sneakers were already soaked through, and his thin grey hoodie clung to his skinny frame, offering little protection against the October chill. He clutched a folded piece of paper in his hands, the edges damp and softening from the humidity. It was a recruitment poster he had torn from the bulletin board at the public library earlier that afternoon. The image showed soldiers in full combat gear, their faces set with determination, their bodies strong and capable. Beneath them, bold letters proclaimed, "Army strong, be all you can be." Marcus had memorized every word on that poster. He had traced the outlines of the soldiers with his finger, imagining himself standing among them. In his mind, he wore the same uniform, carried the same weapons, possessed the same unwavering courage. In his mind, he was someone who mattered. But the rain kept falling, and the reality of his situation pressed down on him like a physical weight. He was a foster kid. He had been bounced between 7 different homes in the past 4 years. He was small for his age, underfed, and possessed nothing of value except a battered backpack containing 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a dog-eared copy of The Art of War he had found in a donation bin. The sound of laughter cut through the rhythm of the rain. Marcus looked up to see 3 boys from his new school approaching the pavilion, their expensive rain jackets keeping them dry, their faces twisted with the particular cruelty that some teenagers seem to cultivate like a skill. "Well, well," said the tallest one, a boy named Derek whose father owned the largest car dealership in Cedar Falls. "Look who we found, the homeless kid from 3rd period." "I'm not homeless," Marcus said quietly, though he knew the distinction between homeless and foster care meant nothing to boys like Derek. "Whatever you say, charity case." Derek snatched the recruitment poster from Marcus's hands before he could react. He unfolded it, his lips curling into a sneer as he examined the image. "What's this? Army recruitment? You've got to be kidding me." The other 2 boys crowded around, their laughter echoing off the metal awning. "You think you're going to be a soldier?" Derek asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look at you. You're like a skeleton with skin. You probably can't even do 1 push-up." "I can do push-ups," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his cheeks. "Sure you can." Derek crumpled the poster into a ball and threw it into a nearby puddle. "Face it, foster boy, kids like you don't become soldiers, you don't become anything. You end up on the streets or in prison, just like your parents probably did." Marcus felt the words like a physical blow, but he didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that showing pain only encouraged bullies. Instead, he kept his expression neutral, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Derek's shoulder. "Nothing to say." Derek stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell his expensive cologne. "That's what I thought. You're nothing, and you always will be." The 3 boys walked away, their laughter fading into the rain. Marcus waited until they were out of sight before he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he walked to the puddle where the crumpled poster lay. He picked it up, carefully smoothing out the wrinkles, wiping away the mud and water as best he could. The image was blurred now, the colors running together, but he could still make out the shapes of the soldiers. "I will be something," he whispered to no one. "I will." If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. Your support helps us continue creating these inspiring stories, and it means more than you know. Now let's continue with Marcus's journey. The group home where Marcus lived sat on the eastern edge of Cedar Falls, a squat brick building that had once been a small factory. It had been converted in the 1990s, and the institutional atmosphere remained, from the fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead to the linoleum floors that never seemed clean, no matter how often they were mopped. Marcus arrived back just before curfew, slipping through the side door to avoid the front desk where Mrs. Patterson sat, with her perpetual frown and her clipboard full of rules. He made his way up the stairwell to the second floor, where the boys' dormitory occupied what had once been the factory's main workspace. 20 beds lined the walls, separated by thin partitions that offered the illusion of privacy without actually providing any. Most of the beds were occupied, their inhabitants engaged in the typical evening activities of teenagers, scrolling on phones, playing handheld video games, or simply staring at the ceiling in that particular way that suggested they were somewhere else entirely in their minds. Marcus's bed was in the far corner, next to a window that overlooked the parking lot. It wasn't a good view, but it was his, and he had learned to appreciate small claims of territory. He sat down on the thin mattress, pulling out the damaged recruitment poster and smoothing it on his lap once more. Still looking at that thing? Marcus looked up to see Darnell Williams, the only other boy in the home who ever talked to him. Darnell was 16, broad-shouldered and athletic, with a smile that seemed perpetually ready to appear. He had been in foster care since he was 8, and he possessed the kind of calm acceptance that came from years of adapting to circumstances beyond his control. "Derek threw it in a puddle," Marcus said. Darnell sat down on the edge of Marcus's bed, examining the poster with genuine interest. "Army, huh? I always figured you more for Marines." "The Marines are good too," Marcus admitted, "but I've been reading about the Army Rangers and the Navy SEALs, Special Operations Units, the elite." Darnell let out a low whistle. "That's some serious stuff, little man. You know how hard it is to get into those units? Most people who try don't make it." "I know." Marcus met Darnell's eyes with an intensity that belied his young age. "That's why I need to start preparing now. If I train every day, if I study everything I can find, if I push myself harder than anyone else, maybe I'll have a chance." "You really believe that?" "I have to believe something." Darnell was quiet for a moment, studying Marcus's face. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. Tell you what, I used to run track before I ended up here. I can teach you some things about conditioning, building up your endurance. It won't be easy and you're going to hurt, but if you're serious about this, I'll help where I can." For the first time that day, Marcus felt something warm bloom in his chest. It wasn't hope exactly, more like the distant possibility of hope. But it was something. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're puking after your first real workout." The next morning, Marcus woke at 5, an hour before the required wake-up time. He slipped out of bed, pulled on his only pair of athletic shorts and a t-shirt with holes under the arms, and made his way outside to the small patch of grass behind the group home that served as a recreation area. The air was cold, and his breath came out in visible puffs as he began to stretch the way Darnell had shown him the night before. His muscles protested, stiff from sleep and from years of inadequate nutrition. But he pushed through, bending and reaching, preparing his body for what was to come. He started with running. The recreation area was small, so he traced a loop around its perimeter, counting each circuit. By the 10th lap, his lungs were burning. By the 20th, his legs felt like they were filled with sand. By the 30th, he had to stop, bent over with his hands on his knees, gasping for air. But he didn't quit. After a few minutes of recovery, he dropped to the ground and began doing push-ups. He could only manage 12 before his arms gave out. Then he rolled over and did sit-ups until his stomach muscles screamed. Then he was back on his feet, running again. This became his routine. Every morning, before anyone else was awake, Marcus was outside training. He tracked his progress in a small notebook, recording the number of laps, push-ups and sit-ups he completed each day. Slowly, painfully, the numbers began to increase. Weeks passed. The October chill deepened into November cold, but Marcus didn't stop. He trained in rain and in early snow, his body adapting to the demands he placed on it. His appetite increased, and he found himself eating everything available at meals, his body desperate for fuel to rebuild the muscles he was breaking down each morning. Mrs. Patterson noticed the change in him. She called him into her office one afternoon, her clipboard in hand, her eyes suspicious. "Marcus, one of the night staff reported that you've been leaving the building before wake-up time. Care to explain?" Marcus stood straight, his hands at his sides. "I've been exercising, ma'am, running and calisthenics. I'm trying to get in shape." "And get in shape for what?" "I want to join the military when I'm old enough. Special operations if I can make it." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted from suspicious to something that might have been pity. "Marcus, I appreciate your ambition, but you need to be realistic. The military has strict requirements, and frankly, your academic record isn't strong enough for the kind of programs you're talking about." "I'm working on that too," Marcus said. "I've been studying in the library after school, math and science mostly. I know I need to improve." "That's commendable, but—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Young men in your situation often have difficulties adjusting to the structure of military life. The statistics aren't encouraging." "I'm not a statistic, ma'am." Something flickered in Mrs. Patterson's eyes, perhaps surprise at his directness, or perhaps recognition of something she had once possessed herself. "No," she said finally, "I suppose you're not. Very well, you may continue your morning exercise, but if your grades slip, or if you break any other rules, this privilege will be revoked. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." Marcus left her office with his head held high. It was a small victory, but he had learned to appreciate those. Winter settled over Cedar Falls like a grey blanket, bringing short days and long nights. Marcus continued his training, even when the snow was deep enough that he had to shovel a path before he could run. He continued his studying, spending every available hour in the public library, working through textbooks on mathematics and history, reading everything he could find about military tactics and strategy. He also continued to endure the mockery of his classmates. Derek and his friends never missed an opportunity to remind Marcus of his place in the social hierarchy. They knocked books from his hands in the hallway. They made jokes about his worn clothes and his lack of family. They spread rumors that his parents had been criminals, drug addicts, worse. Marcus absorbed it all without reaction. He had read about mental toughness in the books about special operations training. He knew that the ability to endure psychological pressure was as important as physical strength, so he treated each insult, each humiliation as a training exercise. He let the words wash over him, and he kept moving forward. Spring arrived slowly, bringing warmer temperatures and longer days. Marcus had been at the Cedar Falls group home for 6 months, the longest he had stayed anywhere. He had established routines, built up his strength, improved his grades. For the first time in years, he felt something approaching stability. Then everything changed. It started with a field trip. Marcus's 8th grade class was scheduled to visit a military museum in Des Moines, a 2-hour bus ride from Cedar Falls. Marcus had been looking forward to it for weeks, had even saved up enough money from doing odd jobs around the group home to buy a small souvenir. The museum was everything he had hoped for. Room after room of military history, from the Revolutionary War to the present day. Uniforms and weapons, medals and photographs, artifacts that told the stories of countless soldiers who had served their country with honor. Marcus moved through the exhibits in a kind of trance, absorbing every detail, imagining himself as part of this long tradition. The last section of the museum was dedicated to special operations. There were displays about the Army Rangers, the Green Berets, the Marine Force Recon, but it was the Navy SEAL exhibit that captured Marcus's attention completely. The centerpiece was a life-size model of a SEAL operator in full combat gear. Surrounding it were photographs of real SEALs in action, along with explanations of their training, their missions, their ethos. One quote was emblazoned on the wall in large letters: "The only easy day was yesterday." Marcus stood before that display for so long that his classmates finished the museum tour without him. He didn't notice. He was too busy memorizing every word, every image, every piece of information about these elite warriors who represented the pinnacle of military achievement. Impressive, isn't it? Marcus turned to find a man standing beside him. He was in his early 40s, with close-cropped graying hair and a physique that suggested years of rigorous physical training. He wore civilian clothes, but something about his bearing, the way he held himself, the alert quality of his eyes, suggested military background. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "Are you a veteran?" The man smiled slightly. "Something like that. I served with the teams for 18 years, 3 combat deployments. Now I work with veterans organizations, helping guys transition back to civilian life." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. He was standing next to an actual Navy SEAL, a real one, not a picture in a book or a figure in a display. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What does it take to become a SEAL, I mean? What does it really take?" The man studied Marcus for a long moment, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that he was being evaluated, measured against some internal standard. "Heart," the man said finally. "More than strength, more than speed, more than intelligence. It takes heart. The willingness to push past every limit you thought you had. The determination to get up every time you get knocked down. The refusal to quit, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how impossible it seems." He paused, his eyes still fixed on Marcus. "Why do you ask? You thinking about joining up someday?" "Yes, sir, that's my goal." "How old are you?" 13, sir." The man nodded slowly. "That's young to have such a clear goal. Most kids your age are worried about video games and social media." "I'm not most kids, sir." Something shifted in the man's expression, a flicker of interest, perhaps even recognition. "No," he said, "I can see that you're not. What's your name, son?" "Marcus Johnson, sir." "I'm Commander Frank Morrison, retired. Most people call me Frank." He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it, trying to make his grip as firm as possible. "Tell me, Marcus, what's your situation? Your parents bring you here today?" Marcus hesitated. He had learned to be cautious about revealing his foster care status, knowing how people often reacted. But something about this man, about the directness of his gaze and the steadiness of his presence, made Marcus decide to be honest. "I'm in foster care, sir. The group home in Cedar Falls. This is a school field trip." Frank's expression didn't change, didn't show pity or discomfort or any of the reactions Marcus usually received. He simply nodded. "That's a tough road. I've known some good people who came up through the system. Some of them ended up in the teams with me." "Really?" "Really. Foster care doesn't define what you can become. Only you can do that." Before Marcus could respond, a voice called out from across the room. "Marcus, bus is loading. We're leaving in 5 minutes." It was his teacher, Mrs. Chen, looking harried as she tried to gather the scattered students. "I have to go," Marcus said reluctantly. Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Here, this has my contact information. I live about an hour from Cedar Falls. If you're serious about your goals, and if you can get permission from whoever's responsible for you, I'd be willing to meet with you. Talk more about what it takes to pursue a military career." Marcus took the card, handling it as carefully as if it were made of gold. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, Frank." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you've earned your trident." Marcus ran to catch up with his class, the business card clutched in his hand. As he boarded the bus, he could feel Derek watching him from the back row, but for once, The bully's gaze didn't bother him. He had something more important to think about now. The bus ride back to Cedar Falls seemed to take forever. Marcus sat alone near the front, staring out the window at the flat Iowa landscape but not really seeing it. His mind was racing with possibilities, with hope, with the terrifying prospect that maybe, just maybe, his dreams weren't as impossible as everyone had told him. When he got back to the group home, he went straight to Mrs. Patterson's office. He had never voluntarily sought her out before, and she looked surprised when he knocked on her door. "Marcus, is something wrong?" "No, ma'am, I need to ask you something." He stepped into her office, holding out Frank's business card. "I met a man at the museum today, a retired Navy SEAL. He said he'd be willing to mentor me, to help me prepare for a military career, but I need permission to contact him." Mrs. Patterson took the card, examining it with the skepticism that seemed to be her default state. "Commander Frank Morrison. Marcus, you can't just take business cards from strangers." "He's not a stranger, ma'am. He's a decorated veteran. You can look him up. I'm sure there's information about him online." "Even so, there are procedures, background checks. We can't just allow our residents to have unsupervised contact with adults outside the system." "I understand that, ma'am. I'm willing to do whatever's required. Supervised meetings, background checks, whatever. This is important to me, more important than anything." Mrs. Patterson looked at Marcus for a long moment, and he saw something shift in her expression. It wasn't warmth exactly, but perhaps a grudging respect. "I'll look into it," she said finally. "I'm not making any promises, but I'll look into it." "Thank you, ma'am." The background check took 3 weeks, 3 weeks of waiting, of hoping, of barely contained anxiety. Marcus threw himself into his training with renewed intensity, running extra laps, adding extra push-ups, studying late into the night. He needed to be ready. He needed to prove that he was worthy of this opportunity. Finally, Mrs. Patterson called him back to her office. "The background check came back clean," she said, and Marcus felt relief flood through him, like warm water. "Commander Morrison is exactly who he said he is. Decorated veteran, currently working with several veterans organizations. No criminal history, no red flags. So I can contact him. Under certain conditions, all meetings must be reported in advance. They must take place in public locations. You must check in with staff before and after each meeting, and if at any point I feel that this arrangement isn't in your best interest, it will be terminated immediately." "I understand. I agree to all of it." Mrs. Patterson handed back the business card. "Then you may contact him, but Marcus, be careful. Don't let yourself get too invested in something that might not work out." "Yes, ma'am." But as he left her office, Marcus knew he was already invested. He had been invested since the moment he tore that recruitment poster off the library bulletin board. This wasn't a casual interest or a passing phase. This was his purpose. He called Frank that evening from the group home's common phone, his hands trembling slightly as he dialed the number. "Morrison." "Commander Morrison? I mean Frank, this is Marcus Johnson. We met at the museum in Des Moines." There was a brief pause, then, "Marcus, good to hear from you. I was hoping you'd call." "My caseworker approved the contact. She said I can meet with you as long as we follow certain rules." "Rules are good. Rules keep things above board. How about this Saturday? There's a diner in Cedar Falls, Marge's place. You know it?" "Yes, sir, I know it." "Meet me there at 10 in the morning. We'll have breakfast, talk about what you want to achieve, and see if we can put together a plan." "I'll be there." Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Marcus had barely slept, running through imaginary conversations in his head, trying to anticipate questions and prepare answers. He showered, dressed in his cleanest clothes, and walked the 2 miles to Marge's place, arriving 20 minutes early. Frank was already there, sitting in a booth near the back with a cup of coffee in front of him. He stood as Marcus approached, shaking his hand with the same firm grip Marcus remembered from the museum. You're early, that's good. Punctuality is important. Yes, sir. And you can drop the sir. Frank is fine. They sat down, and a waitress appeared with menus and another cup of coffee for Marcus, though he ordered orange juice instead. Frank ordered a large breakfast, eggs and bacon and hash browns and toast, and insisted that Marcus do the same. You need calories if you're going to train properly, Frank said. I can tell from looking at you that you're not getting enough. What's the food situation at your group home? It's adequate, Marcus said carefully. 3 meals a day, not much variety, but enough. Adequate isn't going to cut it. If you're serious about special operations, you need to think of food as fuel. You need protein for muscle development, complex carbohydrates for energy, healthy fats for brain function. We'll work on a nutrition plan as part of your training. Training? Marcus felt his pulse quicken. You're going to train me? Frank took a sip of his coffee, his eyes measuring Marcus over the rim of the cup. Let me be clear about something. What I'm offering isn't a guarantee. I can't promise you'll make it into the military, let alone special operations. The attrition rate for SEAL training is over 70%, and that's for people who are already in peak physical condition. What I can offer is guidance, knowledge, the benefit of my experience. But the work, the real work, that's going to have to come from you. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't going to be fun. It's going to hurt. You're going to want to quit. There will be days when every part of your body is screaming at you to stop, and you'll have to find a way to keep going anyway. I can do that. Frank smiled slightly. We'll see. Tell me about your current training routine. Marcus described his morning workouts, the running and calisthenics, the gradual increase in repetitions and distance. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. That's a decent foundation, he said when Marcus finished. Better than I expected, but it's too random, too unfocused. You need a structured program that targets specific areas: cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, flexibility, and mental toughness. We're going to build you from the ground up. Their food arrived, and they ate while Frank outlined his proposed training plan. Weekly meetings where he would teach Marcus proper form and technique. Daily workouts that Marcus would complete on his own, with Frank available by phone for questions and guidance. Monthly fitness tests to track progress. Reading assignments on military history, leadership, and strategy. There's also your education, Frank said. What are your grades like? Improving, Marcus said. I was behind when I got here, but I've been working hard. Mostly B's now, a couple of A's in history and PE. That's not good enough for officer candidate programs, and it's definitely not good enough for special operations selection. You need to be at the top of your class, not just passing. We'll add academic tutoring to your schedule. I can't afford a tutor. Don't worry about that. I know some people, veterans who work as educators. They'll help out as a favor to me. Marcus felt overwhelmed, not by the challenge, but by the generosity. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I'm just some kid from a group home. Frank was quiet for a moment, his expression growing thoughtful. I had a son, he said finally. Dylan. He died 3 years ago, motorcycle accident. He was 24. He paused, taking a breath. Before he died, he used to volunteer at a youth center, worked with kids who didn't have much, kids like you. He believed that everyone deserved a chance, regardless of where they came from. I'm sorry about your son. Thank you. After he died, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was angry, lost. Then I realized that the best way to honor his memory was to continue his work, to help young people who needed it. When I saw you at that museum, looking at the SEAL display with such intensity, such hunger, I saw something. Potential. The kind of potential that deserves to be developed. He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Marcus's. I'm not doing this out of pity, Marcus. I'm doing it because I believe you have what it takes, but you're going to have to prove me right. Are you ready for that? Yes, Marcus said, and he had never meant anything more in his life. I'm ready. The training began the following week. Frank drove to Cedar Falls every Saturday morning, meeting Marcus at the high school track, which was open to the public on weekends. Those first sessions were brutal. "Your form is terrible," Frank said after watching Marcus run his first lap. "You're heel striking, wasting energy with every step. You're hunching your shoulders, restricting your breathing. We're going to fix all of that." He spent the first hour teaching Marcus the fundamentals of efficient running: midfoot strike, relaxed arms, steady breathing. Then they moved to strength training, using nothing but Marcus's body weight. "Push-ups, show me what you've got." Marcus dropped to the ground and began pumping out push-ups. He made it to 30 before his arms began to shake. "Stop. Your back is sagging, your head is dropping, your hands are too far forward. You're not working the right muscles, and you're setting yourself up for injury. Again, but this time, do it right." Frank positioned Marcus's hands at shoulder width, corrected the angle of his elbows, showed him how to engage his core to keep his body straight. The proper form was harder, much harder. Marcus could only manage 15 push-ups before collapsing. "That's okay. 15 correct push-ups are worth more than 30 sloppy ones. We'll build from here." They worked for 3 hours that first Saturday. By the end, Marcus was drenched in sweat, his muscles trembling, his lungs burning. But he felt something he had rarely experienced before: accomplishment. He had pushed himself further than he thought possible, and he had survived. "Same time next week," Frank said, as they walked to the parking lot. "In the meantime, I want you running every morning using the form I showed you. Start with 2 miles, at a quarter mile each week, and here." He handed Marcus a thick paperback book, Into the Fire, a first-hand account of the most extraordinary battle in the Afghan war. "What's this?" "Required reading. It's about a battle where a small team of soldiers held off an enemy force 10 times their size. I want you to understand what real courage looks like, not the Hollywood version. Read it, and we'll discuss it next week." Marcus took the book, feeling its weight in his hands. "Thank you, Frank." "Don't thank me, just don't quit." The weeks that followed were the hardest of Marcus's life. He trained every day, pushing through pain and exhaustion, learning to embrace discomfort as a sign of growth. His body began to change, muscles developing where there had been only skin and bones, his endurance increasing steadily. But it wasn't just physical. Frank's reading assignments opened Marcus's mind to new ways of thinking about leadership, strategy, and sacrifice. They discussed the books during their Saturday sessions, Frank challenging Marcus to analyze decisions, to understand the human factors behind military success and failure. "War isn't won by the strongest side," Frank said one morning as they cooled down from a particularly grueling workout. "It's won by the side that refuses to quit, by the side with the most heart. Remember that." School became easier too. The tutors Frank arranged, veterans who taught at local colleges, helped Marcus catch up on years of neglected education. His grades improved from B's to A's. His teachers noticed the change, commenting on his newfound focus and discipline. Not everyone was pleased with Marcus's transformation. Derek and his friends continued their harassment, though their tactics became more desperate as Marcus refused to react. "Look at the little soldier boy," Derek sneered one day in the cafeteria, "playing pretend with his military daddy. Does he know you're just a throwaway? A kid nobody wanted?" Marcus looked at Derek calmly. "At least I'm working towards something. What are you working toward, Derek? Being a car salesman like your dad?" The cafeteria erupted in laughter, and Derek's face turned red with fury. He lunged at Marcus, but Marcus was ready. Months of training had given him quick reflexes and a solid stance. He sidestepped Derek's wild punch, causing the larger boy to stumble and fall. "I don't want to fight you," Marcus said quietly, so only Derek could hear. "But if you come at me again, I'll defend myself, and you won't like how that turns out." Derek never bothered him again. Summer arrived, bringing long days and intense heat. Frank increased Marcus's training, adding swimming to his routine. They drove to a lake outside Cedar Falls, where Frank taught Marcus the combat sidestroke used by Navy SEALs. "The ocean is your friend and your enemy," Frank explained as Marcus struggled through the water. "You have to learn to be comfortable in it, to move efficiently, to survive even when you're exhausted and cold and afraid. This lake is just the beginning." Marcus swallowed water, coughed, kept swimming. His arms ached, his legs burned, but he refused to stop. He had learned to push through barriers he once thought impossible. By the end of summer, Marcus could run 5 miles without stopping. He could do 50 push-ups with perfect form. He could swim a mile in open water. He had gained 15 pounds of muscle and several inches in height. But more importantly, he had gained confidence in himself. Fall brought Marcus's freshman year of high school. He was still in the group home, still a foster kid, but he no longer felt defined by those labels. He had a purpose, a direction, a mentor who believed in him. He also had something else, a growing reputation. Word had spread about the kid who trained with a retired Navy SEAL, who had gone from scrawny and shy to fit and confident. Other students began approaching him, asking about his workout routine, his diet, his goals. "You should start a fitness club," suggested a girl named Sarah Chen, whose mother was Marcus's 8th grade teacher. "Help other kids get in shape. It would look good on your college applications, too." Marcus liked the idea. With Frank's guidance, he founded the Cedar Falls High School Fitness Club. They met 3 times a week after school, doing the same workouts Marcus did, learning the same principles of discipline and perseverance. The club started with 5 members. By the end of the school year, it had grown to 30. Marcus found that he enjoyed teaching, sharing the knowledge Frank had given him, watching others discover their own potential. "You're a natural leader," Frank observed during one of their Saturday sessions. "That's not something that can be taught. You either have it or you don't." "I learned it from you," Marcus said. "No, I helped you develop what was already there. The leadership, the determination, the refusal to accept defeat. That's all you." The years passed. Marcus grew from a scrawny 13-year-old into a tall, muscular young man. He maintained his training, his studies, his leadership of the fitness club. He earned straight A's in high school, became captain of the cross-country team, was elected president of the student council. But he never forgot where he came from. He visited the group home regularly, mentoring younger residents, showing them by example that their circumstances didn't have to define their futures. "You're different," one of them said once, a 10-year-old boy named James, who reminded Marcus painfully of himself at that age. "The other fosters who leave, they never come back. But you keep coming back." "Because I remember what it was like," Marcus said, "feeling alone, feeling like nobody cared. I want you to know that someone cares, that things can get better." "Do you really believe that?" "I do, because I'm living proof." Senior year arrived, bringing with it the culmination of everything Marcus had worked toward. He had applied to the United States Naval Academy, one of the most competitive colleges in the country. His grades were excellent, his extracurricular activities impressive, his physical fitness outstanding. But the academy looked for more than statistics. They looked for character. The interview was conducted by a panel of naval officers at a military recruiting station in Des Moines. Marcus wore his only suit, a second-hand purchase from a thrift store that he had carefully altered to fit. He sat straight in his chair, meeting the officers' eyes, answering their questions with the calm confidence Frank had helped him develop. "Tell us about your background, Mr. Johnson." Marcus had rehearsed this many times. "I grew up in the foster care system. I was placed in 7 different homes before ending up at a group home in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I don't know my biological parents. I don't have family wealth or connections or legacy status. What I have is a goal, and I've spent the last 4 years preparing to achieve it.
What goal is that?
To serve my country as a naval officer, ultimately to earn a place in the special warfare community, to become a Navy SEAL. The officers exchanged glances. One of them, a commander with a chest full of ribbons, leaned forward. You understand that the path you're describing is extraordinarily difficult. The attrition rate for SEAL candidates is over 70%, even for those who make it through initial training. I understand, sir. I also understand that someone has to be in the 30% who succeed. I intend to be one of them. And what makes you think you have what it takes? Marcus thought about everything he had been through. The years of instability, the cruelty of his peers, the constant struggle to survive. He thought about Frank's lessons, about the books he had read, about the countless hours of training. Because I've already been tested, sir. My whole life has been a selection process. I've faced challenges that most people can't imagine, and I've overcome them. Not by being stronger or smarter than everyone else, but by refusing to quit. That's what special operations requires, isn't it? The refusal to quit. The commander smiled slightly. You've done your homework. I've done more than homework, sir. I've prepared, and I'll continue to prepare every day until I achieve my goal or die trying. The interview lasted another hour, but Marcus knew from that moment that he had made an impression. He answered every question directly and honestly, acknowledging his weaknesses while emphasizing his determination to overcome them. When it was over, the commander shook his hand. You're not like most candidates we see, Mr. Johnson. That's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it is interesting.
Thank you, sir.
3 months later, Marcus received the letter that changed his life. He'd been accepted to the United States Naval Academy, class of 2026. He called Frank immediately. I got in, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I got in. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Frank spoke, his voice was thick. I knew you would. From the first time I met you, I knew. I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when nobody else did. No, I just helped you see what was already there. The strength, the determination, the heart. That was all you, Marcus. That was always you. Graduation day at Cedar Falls High School was warm and sunny. Marcus sat with his classmates in the gymnasium, wearing his cap and gown, waiting for his name to be called. He had been chosen to give the valedictorian address. He had worked on the speech for weeks, wanting to get every word right. When his turn came, he walked to the podium and looked out at the audience. He saw his teachers, his classmates, the members of his fitness club. He saw Mrs. Patterson from the group home, looking proud despite herself. He saw Darnell, who had aged out of foster care 2 years earlier, but had traveled back to Cedar Falls specifically for this day. And he saw Frank sitting in the front row, wearing a suit and tie, his eyes already glistening. 4 years ago, Marcus began, I was a skinny, scared kid with nothing but a dream. I'd been told my whole life that kids like me don't succeed, that foster kids are damaged goods, that we're destined for failure, for prison, for the streets. I was told that dreaming of something better was a waste of time. He paused, letting the words sink in. I chose not to listen. I chose to believe that my circumstances didn't have to define my destiny. I chose to work harder than anyone thought possible, to push myself beyond every limit, to refuse to quit no matter how hard things got. And I didn't do it alone. His eyes found Frank's. There's someone here today who believed in me when nobody else did. A retired Navy SEAL who saw potential in a foster kid and decided to invest in it. He gave me his time, his knowledge, his guidance. He taught me that strength isn't about muscles, it's about heart. That leadership isn't about giving orders, it's about service. That the true measure of a man isn't where he comes from, but where he's going. He saw Frank lower his head, his shoulders shaking slightly. In 3 months, I'm leaving for the United States Naval Academy. I'm going to become a naval officer, and then I'm going to try out for the SEAL teams. I know the odds are against me. I know that most people don't make it. But I also know something else. I know that I'm not most people. I know that I've already survived challenges that would break most adults. And I know that somewhere right now there's another kid like me, a kid who's being told that their dreams are impossible, a kid who's ready to give up. He leaned into the microphone. To that kid, wherever you are, I want to say this: don't give up. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't be. Your past doesn't define your future. Your circumstances don't determine your potential. If you're willing to work, to sacrifice, to push through the pain and the doubt and the fear, you can achieve things that nobody thought possible. I'm proof of that. And one day you will be too. The applause started slowly but built to a roar. Marcus stepped away from the podium, his heart full. After the ceremony, Frank approached him, his eyes red but his smile wide. That was a hell of a speech, sailor. I meant every word. Frank reached out and clasped Marcus's shoulder. I know you did. That's what made it powerful. They stood together in the afternoon sun, mentor and student, 2 men connected by something deeper than blood. You know, this is just the beginning, Frank said. The academy is going to be hard. Buds is going to be harder. The fleet is going to be harder still. I know. You ready for it? Marcus thought about everything he had been through, the loneliness and the pain, the bullying and the doubt, the early mornings and the aching muscles, the books and the tests and the endless pursuit of a goal that everyone said was impossible. I've been ready my whole life, he said. I just didn't know it until I met you. The United States Naval Academy sat on the banks of the Severn River in Annapolis, Maryland, a collection of stately buildings that had produced naval officers for over 170 years. Marcus arrived on induction day, known as I-Day, carrying nothing but a small bag containing the few personal items he was allowed. The next several hours were a blur of activity: haircut, uniform issued, medical examination, physical fitness test. At every step, upperclassmen shouted instructions, demanding immediate compliance, tolerating no mistakes. It was designed to be overwhelming, to strip away civilian comforts and instill military discipline. Marcus handled it better than most. Years of Frank's training had prepared him for exactly this kind of controlled chaos. He responded to orders instantly, kept his bearing even when being screamed at, performed every physical task with precision. You've done this before, one of the upperclassmen said, eyeing Marcus suspiciously during a drill. No, sir, but I've trained for it. We'll see about that. Plebe summer was 7 weeks of intensive indoctrination, designed to transform civilian high school graduates into military personnel. Days started before dawn and ended after dark, filled with physical training, classroom instruction, drill practice, and endless attention to detail. Marcus thrived, while other plebes struggled with the sudden loss of freedom, the constant pressure, the relentless demands. Marcus felt almost comfortable. This was what he had been preparing for. This was his element. His roommate was a kid from Texas named Thomas Carter, whose father and grandfather had both graduated from the academy. Thomas had grown up with military discipline, but even he was impressed by Marcus's resilience. Where did you learn to handle all this? Thomas asked one night, whispering in the darkness of their room during the precious few minutes before lights out. Foster care, Marcus replied, and a really good mentor. You're going to go far here, I can tell. The academic year began in September, bringing a new set of challenges. The course load was rigorous: calculus, physics, chemistry, naval science, professional development. Marcus threw himself into his studies with the same intensity he brought to physical training. He also began to build relationships, finding his place within the complex social structure of the academy. He joined the marathon team, where his endurance running skills made him a valuable asset. He became known as someone who could be relied upon, who would help a struggling classmate with homework or take an extra watch shift when someone was sick. But he never forgot his ultimate goal. Every physical training session, he pushed himself a little harder. Every weekend leave, he spent time swimming in the Chesapeake Bay, preparing for the aquatic demands of SEAL training. He read every book about special operations he could find, studying the tactics and mindset of the warriors he hoped to join. Summers were spent in training assignments around the fleet. Marcus served on a destroyer in the Pacific, learning the practical skills of seamanship. He completed airborne school at Fort Benning, earning his jump wings. He spent a month at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, observing the SEAL candidates going through basic underwater demolition SEAL training, known as BUDS. What he saw there was brutal. Young men pushed to their absolute limits and beyond. Hours of continuous physical exercise in freezing water. Log PT, where teams carried massive wooden logs until their bodies screamed. Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with almost no sleep. "Still want this?" asked the SEAL instructor who was showing him around. "More than anything," Marcus replied. The instructor studied him for a moment. Good, because wanting it is the only thing that gets you through. Senior year arrived. Marcus was now a firstie, a midshipman first class, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entailed. He had maintained excellent grades, demonstrated leadership in multiple capacities, and earned the respect of both his peers and his superiors. Service assignment night was in November. This was when seniors would learn where they would be assigned after graduation. Marcus had submitted his request months earlier. Naval Special Warfare, the pipeline that would eventually lead to SEAL training. The assignments were read out alphabetically. When they reached the J's, Marcus held his breath. Johnson Marcus T. Naval Special Warfare. He had done it. He had earned his chance. The celebration that night was subdued by academy standards, but heartfelt. Thomas, who had been assigned to surface warfare, clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "You're really doing this, aren't you? Going for the Trident." "That was always the plan. You're the only person I know who's crazy enough to want it and disciplined enough to actually have a shot." Marcus called Frank that night, from a quiet corner of Bancroft Hall. "I got it," he said. "Special warfare." There was a long silence on the other end. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. More proud than I can say. I haven't done anything yet. Training hasn't even started. You've already done more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. You've proven that your past doesn't determine your future. Whatever happens next, you've already won." Marcus felt tears prickling at his eyes. "I'm going to make it, Frank. I'm going to earn my Trident, and I'm going to come back and show it to you." "I know you will. I've never doubted it for a second." Graduation from the United States Naval Academy was held in May on a brilliant spring day with the Chesapeake Bay sparkling in the distance. Marcus stood with his classmates in their white dress uniforms, waiting to receive his commission as an ensign in the United States Navy. The ceremony was full of tradition. The parade of colors, the speeches, the presentation of diplomas. When the superintendent finally said the words, "Class of 2026 dismissed," 1,000 caps flew into the air, and Marcus felt a surge of pride that almost overwhelmed him. Among the crowd of families and friends, Frank was easy to spot. He stood near the back, still wearing the same suit he had worn to Marcus's high school graduation 4 years earlier. When Marcus pushed through the crowd to reach him, Frank snapped to attention and rendered a sharp salute. "Congratulations, Ensign Johnson. Marcus returned the salute, then pulled Frank into a hug. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. "Yes, you could have. You just would have done it slower." They laughed together, and for a moment the years fell away. They were just two men, connected by something deeper than rank or uniform. "What now?" Frank asked. 3 weeks of leave, then I report to Coronado." "Buds! Buds!" Frank nodded slowly. "The hardest military training in the world. 6 months of hell. Most candidates don't make it." "I'm going to make it." "I know, but it's not going to be easy. Nothing about this path has ever been easy for you." "That's why I'm going to succeed, because I know how to do hard things." The Naval Special Warfare Center at Coronado was located on a narrow strip of land between San Diego Bay and the Pacific Ocean. It was here that ordinary men were transformed into SEALs, or more often, where they discovered that they couldn't be. Marcus arrived in early June, one of 156 candidates beginning Phase 1 of BUDS. They came from all branches of the military, from all backgrounds and walks of life. Some were former college athletes, others were enlisted men seeking to improve their careers. Some had been preparing for years, others had made the decision on impulse. All of them would be tested. The first week was Indoctrination Week, intended to familiarize candidates with the program and begin the physical conditioning. But even this introductory period was brutal by any normal standard. Days began at 4 in the morning with a 2-mile beach run, followed by hours of calisthenics, obstacle coursework, and open ocean swimming. Marcus's years of training with Frank paid immediate dividends. While other candidates struggled with the physical demands, Marcus maintained a steady pace. While others panicked during the swim evolutions, Marcus moved through the water with the efficiency Frank had taught him. "You're making this look easy," one of the instructors observed during the second week. "It's not easy, instructor. I'm just prepared." "We'll see how prepared you are when Hell Week comes." First phase continued for 8 weeks, building intensity gradually. Candidates dropped out every day, ringing the bell that signified their voluntary withdrawal from the program. By the end of first phase, the class had shrunk from 156 to 87. Then came Hell Week. Hell Week was the legendary crucible of SEAL training, 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. It was designed to push candidates to their absolute breaking point, to identify those with the mental toughness to continue when everything in their body and mind screamed at them to stop. The week began on a Sunday night with a thunderous chaos known as breakout. Instructors pounded on doors, set off explosions, sprayed water, created an environment of total pandemonium. From that moment forward, there was no rest. Marcus remembered the week in fragments, his exhausted mind struggling to process the endless stream of physical and mental challenges. Cold water immersion in the Pacific, lying in the surf zone until their bodies were numb. Log PT, carrying telephone pole-sized logs for hours until their arms and legs shook uncontrollably. Boat races, paddling inflatable boats through the surf, getting dumped by waves, paddling again. Around the clock, instructors offered candidates the chance to quit. All they had to do was ring the bell and the pain would stop. The temptation was overwhelming. Marcus saw strong men, men who had excelled in every physical test, walk to that bell and ring it. He saw them crying as they did it, ashamed but unable to continue. He never rang the bell. When the whispers of doubt crept into his mind, Marcus thought about Frank, about the years of preparation, the early morning runs, the lessons about mental toughness. He thought about all the people who had told him he would never amount to anything, that foster kids were destined for failure. He used their doubt as fuel. On Thursday afternoon, the instructors gathered the remaining candidates on the beach. Marcus looked around, his eyes gritty with exhaustion, his body battered and bruised. Of the 87 candidates who had started Hell Week, only 34 remained. "Congratulations," the lead instructor said. "You have secured Hell Week." It wasn't over. Hell Week was just the beginning, but it was the most important beginning, the moment that separated those who could from those who couldn't. Second phase focused on combat diving, learning to use the various underwater breathing apparatus that SEALs employed on missions. It was technically demanding and physically challenging in different ways than first phase. Marcus struggled initially with the diving evolutions. Unlike running or calisthenics, diving required a comfort with being underwater that didn't come naturally. During one pool competency test, where candidates had to remain calm while their diving equipment was sabotaged by instructors, Marcus nearly panicked. He caught himself at the last moment, forcing his mind to calm, his breathing to slow. He worked through the problem methodically, just as Frank had taught him to work through any obstacle. When he surfaced, the instructor nodded curtly. "You almost lost it down there." "Yes, instructor." "But you didn't, that's what matters." Third phase was land warfare, 9 weeks of weapons training, demolitions, tactics, and navigation. This was where all the physical conditioning and mental toughness came together into practical skills. Marcus excelled here, his years of study finally put into practice. Graduation from BUD/S was a smaller ceremony than the academies, but no less meaningful. Only 22 of the original 156 candidates received their graduation certificates. But they were not yet SEALs. SEAL qualification training followed, another 6 months of advanced instruction. Then came their first assignment to a SEAL team, where they would spend another 18 months earning the right to wear the trident, the gold insignia that marked a full-fledged Navy SEAL. For Marcus, that first assignment was SEAL Team 3, based in Coronado. He arrived as a probationary member, still having much to prove. The operators he would serve with were veterans with multiple deployments, men who had seen combat and proven themselves under fire. They were also skeptical of new arrivals. "Academy boy," one of them said on Marcus's first day. "You think those fancy textbooks prepared you for the real thing?" "No, Senior Chief. I think being underestimated my whole life prepared me for the real thing." The veteran's eyes narrowed, then crinkled with a hint of amusement. "We'll see." The 18 months of probationary service were intense. Marcus trained constantly, absorbing everything the experienced operators could teach him. He proved himself in increasingly difficult training scenarios, earning grudging respect through competence and effort. Deployment came in his second year with the team. They were sent to the Middle East, to a region where American forces were engaged in counter-terrorism operations. It was there that Marcus would face his ultimate test. The mission was a night raid on a compound where a high-value target was believed to be located. Marcus was part of the assault team, tasked with breaching the compound and securing the target. Everything went wrong from the start. The helicopter insertion was compromised when they took ground fire on approach. Marcus felt rounds punching through the thin skin of the aircraft, heard the pilot cursing as he fought to keep them airborne. They made it to the ground, but the element of surprise was gone. The firefight that followed was chaos. Muzzle flashes in the darkness, the crack of rounds passing inches from his head, the shouts of his teammates as they moved through the compound. Marcus operated on pure training, his body and mind functioning as one. He cleared rooms, engaged targets, provided covering fire for his teammates. When one of the operators was hit, Marcus dragged him to cover, applied a tourniquet to his wounded leg, kept fighting. The target was secured. The extraction helicopter arrived. They made it out. But Marcus was different after that night. The reality of combat, of killing and nearly being killed, left marks that didn't show on the surface. He understood now why Frank sometimes got that distant look in his eyes, why he sometimes woke up shouting from nightmares he wouldn't discuss. What changed you? There was no avoiding it. The deployment lasted 7 months. When Marcus returned to Coronado, he was no longer a probationary member. He was a full SEAL with combat experience and the respect of his teammates. He called Frank on his first night back. "I earned it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I earned my trident." There was a long pause on the other end. "I never doubted it," Frank said. "Not for 1 second. I want you to see it. I want you to hold it in your hands. Then come home, son, come home." The next week, Marcus flew to Iowa. He rented a car at the Des Moines airport and drove the familiar roads to Cedar Falls, passing the group home where he had lived, the high school where he had graduated, the diner where he and Frank had first talked about his future. Frank's house was a modest ranch on the outskirts of town, surrounded by cornfields that stretched to the horizon. Marcus pulled into the driveway and saw Frank sitting on the front porch, a cup of coffee in his hands, a dog at his feet. He looked older than Marcus remembered. The grey hair was thinner, the lines on his face deeper, but his eyes were the same, sharp and knowing. Marcus walked up the porch steps and stood before his mentor. "Hey, Frank."
Hey, Marcus.
For a long moment they just looked at each other. Then Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal the gold trident gleaming in the afternoon sun. "This is because of you," Marcus said. "Everything I've accomplished, everything I've become, it all started with you." Frank took the box with trembling hands. He examined the trident, tracing its lines with his finger. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "You know, I've seen a lot of these over the years, earned my own, helped dozens of other men earn theirs. But this one—" He looked up at Marcus, his eyes glistening. "This one means more than all of them." "Why?" "Because I know what it cost you. Not just the training, not just the deployments. I know what you had to overcome to get here. The doubt, the fear, the people who said it couldn't be done. You proved them all wrong." He handed the box back to Marcus and stood up, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "I'm proud of you, son, prouder than I've ever been of anyone." They sat on that porch for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus told stories from his training and deployment, carefully edited to spare Frank the worst details. Frank shared memories from his own career, the missions he could discuss, the men he had served with. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Frank grew quiet. "There's something I need to tell you," he said finally. "What is it?" Frank hesitated, his hand moving to his chest. "I've been sick, heart problems. The doctors say I have maybe a year, maybe less." Marcus felt the words like a physical blow. He had survived Hell Week, survived combat, survived every challenge thrown at him. But this— "No," he said, "there must be something, treatments, surgeries." "I've tried everything, son. Some things can't be fought." Marcus sat in stunned silence, struggling to process this new reality. "I'm glad you came home," Frank continued. "I needed to see you one more time, to see what you've become, to know that everything we worked for wasn't in vain." "It wasn't in vain. It could never be in vain." Frank smiled, a peaceful expression that Marcus had rarely seen on his face. "You know what my son Dylan used to say? He used to say that the best way to live is to pour yourself into others, to leave the world a little better than you found it. I didn't understand what he meant until I met you." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do. You're doing the same thing now, aren't you? Mentoring young people in your unit, volunteering with foster kids when you're stateside. You're continuing what I started, what Dylan started. That's how we live on, Marcus. Not through monuments or medals, but through the people we touch." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face now, making no effort to stop them. "I'm not ready to lose you," he said. "You're not losing me. I'll be right here." Frank placed his hand over Marcus's heart. "Everything I taught you, everything we shared, it's part of you now, and you'll pass it on to others, and they'll pass it on, and so on. That's immortality, son, the only kind that matters. They sat together as darkness fell, two men who had started as strangers and become family. The night was clear, and the stars emerged one by one, the same stars that sailors had navigated by for thousands of years. "One more thing," Frank said, "a favor. Anything. When I'm gone, I want you to take my trident. I want you to carry both of them, yours and mine. A reminder that you never stood alone, that you were always part of something bigger than yourself." Marcus couldn't speak. He simply nodded. "Good. Now tell me more about your deployment. I want to hear everything." And so Marcus talked, his voice steady now, telling stories about missions and teammates and the strange beauty found in the most dangerous places on Earth. Frank listened, occasionally asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, growing quiet during the serious ones. When Marcus finally left, well after midnight, Frank walked him to his car. "You know," Frank said, "when I saw you at that museum all those years ago, I thought I was going to help you. I thought I was going to be the one giving, but you gave me something too." "What was that?" "A reason to keep going. After Dylan died, I was lost. You gave me purpose again. You gave me hope. That's not a small thing." Marcus hugged Frank one last time, memorizing the feel of it, the smell of coffee and pine that always seemed to cling to his mentor. "I'll come back," Marcus promised, "as often as I can." "I know you will." Frank died 8 months later, peacefully in his sleep, with his dog at his feet and photographs of his son and Marcus on the bedside table. Marcus was able to get emergency leave and arrived in Cedar Falls just in time for the funeral. The service was held at a small church in town. The pews were packed with veterans, former students, members of the community Frank had touched over the years. Marcus sat in the front row, wearing his dress whites, Frank's trident in his pocket alongside his own. He had been asked to give the eulogy. Standing before the congregation, looking out at all the faces, Marcus felt the weight of the moment. He thought about everything Frank had given him, everything he had learned, everything he still had to do. "Commander Frank Morrison saved my life," he began. "Not in combat, though he certainly could have. He saved my life by believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, by investing in me when I had nothing to offer in return, by teaching me that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go." He paused, composing himself. "I was a foster kid with a dream that everyone said was impossible. Frank showed me that impossible is just a word that small-minded people use to describe things they can't imagine. He showed me that with enough heart, enough determination, enough refusal to quit, anything can be achieved." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the 2 tridents. "Frank asked me to carry his trident alongside my own. He said it would be a reminder that I never stood alone. But I think it's more than that. I think it's a mission, a call to do for others what he did for me, to find the kids who've been told they can't succeed and show them that they can." He looked at the 2 gold insignias in his hand, gleaming in the light streaming through the church windows. "They laughed at me when I said I wanted to be a soldier. They said foster kids don't become SEALs. They said I was nothing, and I always would be. But Frank looked at me and said something different. He said, 'I'll train him.' Those 3 words changed my life." Marcus's voice caught, but he pushed through. "So here's what I promise, Frank, to your memory and to everyone here. I will find the next kid who needs someone to believe in them. I will look at them and say, 'I'll train you.' And together we will prove that no one is beyond saving, that no dream is too big, that the only thing standing between us and our goals is the willingness to work for them." He placed the tridents back in his pocket over his heart. "Rest easy, Commander. I have the watch now." After the funeral, Marcus walked alone to the park where he had stood as a 13-year-old, clutching a crumpled recruitment poster in the rain. The pavilion was still there, rusty and worn, but the grass was greener now, the sky brighter. He sat on a bench and pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails until he found the one he was looking for. It was from the director of the Cedar Falls Youth Center, asking if he would be willing to mentor some of the young people in their program. Marcus typed his reply with steady fingers. "Yes, when do I start?" He put away his phone and looked up at the sky, thinking about Frank, about Dylan, about all the people who had helped him along the way. He thought about the foster kids who were still out there, still being told that they would never amount to anything. He was going to prove them all wrong, one kid at a time. 2 years later, Marcus stood before a group of young people at the Cedar Falls Youth Center. They ranged in age from 12 to 17, most from backgrounds similar to his own: foster care, group homes, broken families. They looked at him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, the same way he had once looked at Frank. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he began. "I'm a Navy SEAL, and I'm here to tell you that everything you've been told about your limitations is a lie." One of the kids, a thin boy of about 13 with wary eyes, raised his hand. "Why should we believe you?" Marcus smiled. "Because I was sitting where you're sitting now. I was in foster care from age 9. I was told I would never amount to anything. I was laughed at when I said I wanted to be a soldier, but someone believed in me, and that made all the difference." He told them his story from the beginning. The crumpled poster, the bullies, the chance meeting with Frank, the years of training, the academy, buds, deployment. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't pretend it was easy. He told them the truth, that the path to success was long and hard, and that many who started would quit along the way. "But here's the thing," he said. "The ones who make it aren't necessarily the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. They're the ones who refuse to quit, the ones who get knocked down and get back up, the ones who have heart." He looked at the thin boy who had questioned him. "What's your name?"
Isaiah.
"Isaiah, do you have a dream? Something you want to be?" The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I want to be a firefighter, but my foster parents say it's a waste of time to think about stuff like that." "Why do you want to be a firefighter?" "Because they save people. And when I was little, my house caught fire and a firefighter carried me out. He saved my life." Marcus walked over to Isaiah and knelt down so they were at eye level. "That's a noble dream, Isaiah, and I'm going to help you achieve it. Starting tomorrow, we're going to begin training. It won't be easy. You're going to hurt, and you're going to want to quit. But I'll be with you every step of the way. And when you become a firefighter, you're going to save lives too. You're going to be someone's hero, just like that firefighter was yours." For the first time, something flickered in Isaiah's eyes. Not quite hope, but the possibility of hope. "You really think I can do it?" Marcus smiled, hearing Frank's voice in his own. "I know you can, because I'm going to train you." The program grew. Word spread about the former foster kid turned Navy SEAL who was helping young people in Cedar Falls. More kids joined, and Marcus recruited other veterans to help train them. They worked on physical fitness, academic tutoring, and most importantly, mental toughness. Not all of them succeeded. Some quit when the training got hard. Some fell back into old patterns. Some simply weren't ready yet. But many of them made it. They graduated from high school, went to college, joined the military, entered trade schools. They became firefighters and nurses and teachers and engineers. Isaiah became a firefighter. On the day he graduated from the fire academy, Marcus was there, watching from the audience. Isaiah looked different now, tall and strong and confident. Nothing like the wary boy who had questioned why anyone should believe in him. After the ceremony, Isaiah found Marcus in the crowd. "I made it," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I knew you would. I want to do what you do. Help other kids, I mean. Show them that they can make it too." Marcus nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. This was how it worked. This was how the cycle continued. "Then let's get you trained," he said. There are a lot of kids out there who need someone to believe in them. They walked out of the auditorium together, two men who had started as lost boys, now standing tall in the sunshine. Behind them, through the open doors, the sound of applause faded, but ahead of them, stretching out like a road with no end, was the future they were building, one kid at a time. In the end, that's what mattered. Not medals or ranks or honors, but the lives touched, the dreams ignited, the faith restored. Frank had understood that. Dylan had understood it too. And now Marcus carried their torch, passing it to others who would pass it on in turn. They laughed at the foster kid's dream of being a soldier. But the Navy SEAL said, "I'll train him." And that made all the difference in the world. The morning sun rose over Cedar Falls, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Marcus stood at the park pavilion, the same one where he had stood as a boy, and watched as a group of young people assembled for their morning training session. Among them was a new arrival, a girl of about 12, with close-cropped hair and defiant eyes. Her name was Destiny, and she had been in foster care for 3 years. Her file said she was a troublemaker, prone to fights and running away. Marcus saw something else. He saw potential. He saw himself. "You're new," he said, approaching her. So? So what do you want to be?" Destiny looked at him for a long moment, her defiance wavering. "I don't know. Nobody ever asked me that before." "Well, I'm asking now." She was quiet, thinking, then softly, "I want to be someone who matters, someone who helps people." Marcus smiled, and the smile held within it all the years of struggle and triumph, all the lessons learned and passed on, all the hope that had sustained him from that first moment he saw the recruitment poster in the library. "Then you've come to the right place," he said. "Welcome to the team." And somewhere, Marcus knew, Frank was watching. Dylan too, all the mentors who had come before and all the ones who would come after. The cycle continued. The dream lived on, and it always would. 5 years had passed since Marcus first returned to Cedar Falls as a mentor. In that time, the program he and Frank had envisioned had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. What started as informal Saturday training sessions at the high school track had evolved into a non-profit organization called Second Chance Foundation. They had a proper facility now, a converted warehouse on the edge of town that housed a gym, classrooms, and meeting spaces. The walls were lined with photographs of successful graduates, young people who had defied the odds just as Marcus had. Marcus had left active duty 2 years earlier, taking a position as a reserve officer while dedicating himself full-time to the foundation. The transition hadn't been easy. Part of him missed the teams, the missions, the brotherhood of warriors. But every time he watched a kid who had been written off by society discover their potential, he knew he had made the right choice. The foundation had chapters in 3 states now, each run by veterans who shared Marcus's passion for helping at-risk youth. They had partnerships with schools and youth services agencies, referrals coming in faster than they could handle. The demand was overwhelming, but Marcus refused to turn anyone away. "Every kid who comes through our doors is someone's Marcus," he told his staff during a particularly difficult week. "They just need someone to believe in them." The success stories accumulated like medals on a uniform. Isaiah, now a battalion chief, ran the Foundation's firefighting preparedness program. 3 graduates were serving in the military, one on his way to becoming an Army Ranger. Dozens more had found careers in healthcare, education, public service. But it was the quieter victories that meant the most to Marcus. The teenage girl who had been afraid to make eye contact, now confidently leading group discussions. The boy who had never finished a book, graduating with honors. The kid who had attempted suicide 3 times, now counseling others through their darkest moments. These were the true measures of success, not numbers or statistics, but lives transformed. Destiny was one of those lives. In the 5 years since she had joined the foundation, she had blossomed into a remarkable young woman. The defiant, troubled girl Marcus had met at the Park Pavilion was now a sophomore at Iowa State University, studying criminal justice with dreams of becoming an FBI agent. She came back to Cedar Falls every summer to help with the program, paying forward what had been given to her. "You changed my life," she told Marcus one evening, as they sat on the porch of Frank's old house, which Marcus had purchased after his mentor's death. "I don't know where I'd be without you." "You changed your own life," Marcus corrected her. "I just helped you see what was possible." "That's what Frank told you, isn't it?" Marcus smiled, thinking of his mentor. "Yeah, he did." "I want to be like you," Destiny said. "Not a SEAL, I mean, but like you, someone who helps people find their potential." "You already are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the cornfields, the same cornfields Frank had looked at for the last years of his life, the same cornfields that had witnessed so many conversations between mentor and student. "Tell me about him," Destiny said, "about Frank. You talk about him, but I never really knew the whole story." So Marcus told her. He told her about the museum, about the first Saturday morning at the track, about the years of training and guidance and belief. He told her about Frank's son Dylan, about the grief that had nearly consumed Frank, and how mentoring Marcus had given him purpose again. He told her about the final conversation on this very porch, about the 2 tridents, about the promise Marcus had made. By the time he finished, stars had emerged overhead, and Destiny was wiping tears from her eyes. "That's beautiful," she said, "and sad, but mostly beautiful." "That's life," Marcus replied. "Beautiful and sad, all mixed together. The key is to focus on the beautiful parts and to help others find beauty in their own lives." Destiny nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "I want to start my own chapter," she said suddenly. "After I graduate, I mean. I want to go back to Des Moines, where I grew up, and start a foundation chapter there. Help kids who are where I was." Marcus felt pride swelling in his chest. This was exactly what Frank had meant about living on through others. "Then let's start planning," he said. "We've got a lot of work to do." The night deepened, and they talked for hours about dreams and plans and the future. Marcus thought about Frank, about Dylan, about all the people who had passed the torch down through generations. He thought about the scrawny 13-year-old standing in the rain with a crumpled recruitment poster, and the Navy SEAL who had looked at that kid and seen something worth investing in. The chain was unbroken. The mission continued. Somewhere in this country right now, there was a kid who needed someone to believe in them. A kid being told they would never amount to anything. A kid with a dream that everyone said was impossible. Marcus had made a promise. To Frank, to himself, to every kid who came through his doors. He would find them. He would train them. And together they would prove that no one is beyond saving. That is the power of belief. That is the legacy of love. That is the difference one person can make in the life of another. They laughed at the foster kid's dream. But someone said, "I'll train him." And that changed everything. Not just for Marcus, not just for Destiny, not just for Isaiah or any of the hundreds of kids who had come through the foundation. For everyone they would touch. For everyone who would hear their stories and be inspired, for every chain of mentorship that would extend into the future, long after Marcus himself was gone. This is how we change the world, one kid at a time, one act of faith at a time, one refusal to give up at a time. And it all starts with 3 simple words. "I'll train him." The words echo through time, spoken by mentors to students, by believers to doubters, by the strong to the struggling. They are the words Frank spoke to Marcus. They are the words Marcus spoke to Isaiah. They are the words Isaiah speaks to the young people he mentors now. They are the words Destiny will speak to the kids in Des Moines. They are the words you can speak to someone in your life who needs to hear them. Because somewhere right now there is someone who is one act of kindness away from giving up, someone who is one word of encouragement away from finding their purpose, someone who is one believer away from achieving their dreams. Be that person. Say those words. Change a life. And in doing so, change the world. The morning sun rises over Cedar Falls, just as it has for centuries, just as it will for centuries to come. The park pavilion still stands, weathered but enduring. The high school track still circles the football field, worn smooth by countless footsteps. And in the Foundation's facility on the edge of town, a new group of young people arrives for their first day of training. They are nervous, skeptical, afraid. They have been told their whole lives that they cannot succeed. But standing at the door to greet them is a man who knows better, a man who was once exactly where they are, a man who carries 2 tridents over his heart and a legacy of belief that stretches back generations. "Welcome," Marcus says, looking at each of them in turn. "I believe in you. Now let's get to work." And somewhere Frank Morrison smiles. The mission continues. The dream lives on. Forever.